Welcome, everybody. We're just letting everybody in. We're starting right on time today. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kylie. I'm with the Basque Museum Cultural Center. I'm the education program specialist. I'll try to look into the camera, so it's distracting. I'm the education program specialist, so I'm the one that organizes these monthly, sometimes bi-monthly, sometimes every couple months. But I organize these educational presentations, and we try to do them on a host of different subjects that we think you guys would find interesting. And I'm really excited today because it looks like we have a lot of people joining us that are new faces. I don't recognize a lot of people, and I just love that. So while everyone is joining us, if you would do me the favor to go into the chat, which if you're new to Zoom, you have your video there where you can see my lovely face, and then on the very bottom is all these little icons, and then they're right in the middle of the chat icon. And just type in where you're joining us from. If you want to have some fun, we did advertise this as a happy hour. So if you have a special beverage, I'm just drinking boring Trader Joe's red wine. But if somebody's doing something more exciting than that, you can share your recipe. And we'll just do that here. A couple of things before we get rocking and rolling. Just as far as Zoom etiquette, you're probably, it's been a year of this, so you probably know it all by now, but you will want to keep yourself muted while something is being presented. And then we will have times throughout our little presentation today where we're asking questions, or we open it up and you can unmute yourself and ask a question. But for the most part, you want to keep yourself muted so that Zoom isn't picking up your noise and interrupting the presentation. If you have a question that you want us to address right away, the best way to do that is to put it into the chat. We will be monitoring that for questions. So always use that chat feature the whole time. And then we still just, oh my gosh, people are still coming in. I'm going to try to get our Facebook set up, because I did say I would do this on Facebook Live, but it's never easy. Well, while I'm doing that, it does take me just a second to get that going. How about we have our special guest today just quickly, not the full spiel, but just do a quick introduction while I get Facebook Live going here.
No problem. Hi, all. I am Mikie McDonnell, your guest speaker for today. I'm really excited to share my story and everything like that. And I'm seeing a lot of places in the chat that I'm familiar with, and I'm really surprised. Aurora Grande, that's not far from where I was born and raised, in San Luis Obispo, so that's really cool. And yeah, I'm really excited, like I said, to share a little modern sheep herding, I guess, and you know, kind of tie it back to the amazing history that I'm still learning about. I don't think I have enough time, or there's enough books about all of this to really know everything, but I feel very blessed that I got to get a little taste of it in my short sheepherding career, and hopefully that sheepherding career is going to continue, you know, when I get down the road a little bit more. But as of now, I'm just monitoring ranches here in California, and I love it. I do miss Idaho, but yeah, I'm just happy to meet you all, and hopefully we can all get together someday and talk a little more about sheep. So I'll give it back to Kylie if she's got it going.
Yeah, I'm ready. Sorry about that. I forget that it takes me a second to get that Facebook Live set up, but now we are good. So anyways, with no further ado, then we'll go ahead and get started. Again, this is going to be pretty casual, pretty low key, so be sure to share your thoughts and ideas in the chat, or when we ask for some questions, and we'll get started. So The very first thing that we thought that we would do, this presentation, we wanted to explore sheep herding, and we have this really unique opportunity with Mikie, our guest speaker, who has experience working as a modern shepherd. And, the Basque have a very strong tie to sheep herding. And so we thought, why not do a little presentation about the history of the Basque people and their connection to sheep herding here in the American West, and how they did it historically, and kind of compare and contrast that to what's being done today by a modern sheepherder and how that's changed over time, and share some of her amazing knowledge she has of agriculture and sheep. So it's going to be a little bit of a two-part way that we tackle this here. Some of it's going to be more historic, some of it's going to be more agriculture based. So bear with us, and we're trying to keep this right to an hour. So if we start you get digging in too much and you're getting tired, you just let us know and we'll move it along. But we'll try not to bore anybody today. So okay, well, give me 1 second here, and if you guys have any questions that you off the bat that you want asked, put them in the chat now while I start sharing my screen, and we'll be sure that we cover it. But otherwise, 1 second, I'm going to share my screen here. I start at the beginning of right now I'm at the end of my PowerPoint, which will do me no good whatsoever. All right, can you guys see that okay? See everything on my internet? All right, sheepherding, here we are. Basque, historic, modern. So I'm usually not the one to give these presentations, so forgive me if I'm a little bit rusty. But what we're discussing today is a little bit about sheepherding. Oops, oh my gosh. Sheepherding in Idaho, the history, the Basque connection, and how ultimately that became the end of an era. And then I will pass it on to Mikie here in just a little bit. I'm going to keep mine pretty brief. So sheepherding in Idaho. And Mikie, you're okay to keep an eye on the chat for me? Right on. Okay, so sheepherding is really integral to the identity of the American Basque. If anyone's ever been to the Basque Museum, you will be inundated with sheep everything. You can't escape it. If you've seen or heard anything about the Basque here, it's connected to sheep. And a very common misconception is that the Basque came here because they were already sheep herders and there was sheep herding going on here. And so they were like, I'm going to go continue being a sheep herder in Idaho. And in reality, that wasn't really the case. The Basque were much better known in the Basque country as fishermen, as whalers, as farmers, certainly doing agricultural things. And there were sheep herders, clearly, but I wouldn't say that this was like their ticket to fame and glory in the Basque country. It is really something they adopted when they came here to the United States. So let's just dispel that myth right away at the beginning here. So the initial waves of Basque, they came to the Western United States between 1885 and 1930. That's like your first wave of immigration. And they mostly did work in the sheep industry. The demand and the price for wool at the time was very high. The job was in great demand. And the Basque sheepherder didn't need to speak English, which would have been a really big hurdle for a lot of these young immigrants coming over who didn't speak English. They spoke Euskera, maybe Spanish, but mostly Euskera. And as it turns out, sheep do not care so much what language you speak. So it was a great opportunity for them and gave them some time to learn English after they came. Oh my gosh, my thing just wants to skip around. I'm so sorry. So most of these were single Basque males immigrating to the United States, and they were a great fit. They would use these wagons, the carros campos, which is very iconic with the big curved top. We see them still today. They would be up in the hills for months at a time. And I love this quote that we have at the bottom, that the isolation was more unbearable than the amount of work, right? Like the work itself perhaps wasn't always so physically demanding, but the isolation was real. And if you can only put yourself in the shoes of a young immigrant who came, maybe 18 years old to a foreign country speaking a foreign language, and you're sent off to the Sawtooth Mountains to be by yourself for 9 months in a wagon, what that would be like. So sheep are not native to Idaho. They were introduced in the 1860s by John Haley, who was a Tennessee immigrant. And they say that in the early 1900s here, see if I can click this without it skipping, there we go. There were 6 times more sheep than people in Idaho. So you have 14,000 sheep in the 1860s to over 2 million sheep by 1918, and it goes up a little bit from there. And I thought it was really quite interesting that it wasn't until the 1970 census that the population of sheep to people in Idaho actually evened out. It was way more sheep. I did not realize how many sheep there were until I was looking into this. So you can see by the nice graph on the side, it's a concerning amount of sheep, really. So we can see why the demand was so high. So this is probably familiar to most of you, but just in case this is completely new for you, oh my gosh, the yearly cycle of a sheep herder, you have spring, early spring, late winter, when there's lambing, and they have these big lambing sheds a lot of the times where you would come down and you'd help with lambing, and that was the start of the work here for a Basque sheep herder. And then spring and summer, you're up in the mountains, up in the high country, moving around for grazing, and that's when the sheep herders really earning their bread and butter, and they're up in the mountains, and they're keeping the sheep safe, keeping them together. Mikie will talk more about that, but that's in the summer and the fall. In the fall, they are bringing the sheep back down. It's the breeding season. It's time to do all your shearing, to take lambs to market, etc. And then the interesting bit is in the winter, there is no work for the Basque sheep herder. And so this is when you see boarding houses, which is another really iconic symbol of the early Basque immigration to Idaho, is these Basque boarding houses. And so sheep herders would fill up them up to the gills. And I mean, I can attest to this in my own young life, that they would earn all their money throughout the year. They'd get their paycheck, and then they would spend it all in the 3 winter months when they were in the cities, and then have to work again, and then spend it all again. And then they're still here, and they never save up enough money to be able to leave again. It's a vicious cycle that I think still speaks to some of us today. But pop in the chat if you've ever had the chance to go to a Basque boarding house. They're a really neat testament to this sheep herder lifestyle. A boarding house would be pretty it was busiest in the winter when all the sheep herders were out of work, but they were also a home for a new immigrant. It was the first place that they would go, you know, when they came to the United States and they immigrated here. And so they were really, I see a nice typo there. Good job, Kylie. So they really did have an important role in the Basque immigration. And if you guys have more interest on boarding houses, I can tell more about it, but I'm not gonna diverge too much. How are you doing? I'm not really looking at the chat, so you'll have to flag me if there's something. That is a lot of sheep, I see that. Any questions so far? We get kind of the yearly cycle for a Basque sheep herder. Probably not anything crazy new for you guys. I just thought to throw a little fancy definition at you. So transhumans is the action or practice of moving livestock from one grazing ground to another in a seasonal cycle, typically lowlands in the winter to highlands in the summer, which is very much so the sheep herder's bread and butter, was this method of moving sheep around. You have 2 different approaches, utilizing the private lands and supplementing with public domain, which is like really big ranch types of operations. Or you have the second approach, which is more mobile, landless, very small scale outfits. You know, it's small, it's private. So it's, you know, you're riding the tides of what the market is doing. So I'll let you take a guess which one most Basque sheep herders. Actually, it was both. I mean, I'll do both. There are some really big wool operations or sheep operations that would hire Basque sheep herders, and then sometimes they were very small family-run things as well. So the map on the left here is a bit of a map that shows. I mean, it's a little bit hard to decipher, but it shows some of the migration patterns of the sheep that were. This is from California, not from Idaho. around Bakersfield, it looks like, but it shows their paths that they would take to like go up to the mountain. It's a very old map, so take that with a grain of salt. Yeah, so what were some of the challenges for a Basque sheepherder? You know, these are some great old photos that we have in our archives. I think it's nice to put yourself into the shoes of a sheepherder, and you know, this is a job that gets romanticized a lot. You know, the sheepherder living in the beautiful mountains, living the life, but it was very, very difficult. They're speaking little to no English. They're extremely isolated, only getting, you know, food and, well, I don't know, like meeting up with maybe the head of the ranch or something every once in a while, but not often. They are having to deal with conflicts with cattlemen who are trying to graze the same land. And then there's also racial prejudices. You know, they used to call the Basque at this time period, you know, maybe in the 1920s, 1930s, Black Bascos. Like it was very racial. And so, I mean, I won't give you too many stories, but there's plenty of stories out there of sheepherders getting shot at, and they're having to stay in their wagons for a day or two until, you know, the threat passed. And for the most part, I mean, but they stuck with it. So it's a testament to the hardworking nature of the Basque, which they're very well known for, that they worked through this, and they kept coming and doing it more and more. Like it did not slow them down. So this quote that I have, I believe this is from one of Johnny Sursa or Beater's books. I have it cited at the end. Excuse me for not knowing off the top of my head. But I'll just go ahead and read it in case you can't see it. They have a confident sense of self, puritanical work ethic, and group cohesiveness that helped make them successful in a frontier culture like America. Basque refer to a physical and physiological strength as indara. This culturally esteemed value includes qualities such as dedication, endurance, and persistence, and is most likely attributed to the success of the Basque sheepherder. So we can ask Mikie a little bit later if she agrees that those are good qualities for a successful sheepherder. And so this continued for some time. This was really the foothold for the Basque immigrant, was to come sheepherding, single men, like we were talking about, young men looking for to be able to make some economic gains over here. So what led to their decline? Why are we not all up in the mountains still herding sheep today? Or are we? Question for later. So in 1924, Congress passes the Immigration Act, limiting the total number of immigrants granted entry, another typo, wonderful job, into the United States, which starts to put a limit on how many people are able to just come over, right? And then in 1934, we have the Taylor Grazing Act is signed by President Roosevelt, requiring those using public lands for grazing to purchase the federal land that they were working on. And so this had a really big impact on the larger sheep operations. And then, of course, in 1929, you have the stock market crash, which they say is the straw that broke the camel's back in this case, where for this generation of Basque immigrants, it just became too much for them to continue coming here and migrating to do sheep herding in the successful en masse way that it was before. And I've just, as an aside, I really like this picture. I think that is a great picture of a sheep herder. Agree or disagree? So World War II, landowners are creating contracts with Basque, paying for their air force so they can come to America in exchange for 3 to 5 years of labor. So we're talking in like the 1940s. And in the 1970s, after the death of Franco, social and economic conditions in the Basque country are improving. So it's becoming less necessary. There's less pressure in the Basque country for Basque to travel to America to work. And so you will see that there's that the Basque sheepherder is beginning to be replaced from other cheap labor from Peru, Bolivia, Mexico, and Chile. So, and I believe you can, I mean, I'm talking historic here, so Mikie will have to update me if that's still the case today. But as far as I know, it's, you can still see sheep herders, and they're even using the Basque wagons and everything. Like if you go to Anderson Dam in Idaho, you run into them on the road, get stuck in sheep traffic, but they're from Peru. They're not Basque at all. So it's we see that even today, there's still repercussions of this. That's a nice photo. Just enjoy that photo for a moment. So what are some of the lasting impacts of the Basque sheep herder today? It was a foothold in America. I gotta keep track of my time here. I was supposed to talk for 10 minutes. Foothold in America. It was hard and lonely. Sheep herding gave the Basque immigrant the foundation for their families to come over. The men were able to come over, and pretty soon it was their brothers, and then their dads, and then their cousins, and then their aunts, and their uncles, and their moms. And before you know it, you have Basques that are now exercise, or they're in many professions, not just sheep herding. But sheep herding was the foothold that got them there. You can see today things like Trailing of the Sheep, which is a yearly festival that's held in the Ketchum-Healy area, and it celebrates that sheep herder lifestyle. And literally, I think like yesterday or the day before, they just announced that they're having it again this year in October. So yay, 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 that things are kind of starting to get back to normal and we get to do Trailing of the Sheep again. Pop it in the chat if you have been to Trailing of the Sheep, or if you want to go to Trailing of the Sheep. It is something else. They've been doing this for ages, where they like run sheep right through the middle of downtown Sun Valley and Ketchum. And it's, if you haven't done it and you're in this area, you absolutely should do it. It's really bizarre and it's amazing. I don't know where else you can do that. Maybe Mikey knows somewhere else where they do it, but I think it's the only place that does that. Oh, and then, oh my gosh, I'm done. Okay, good. I'm going over my time here. So that was mine. Now, before I go and I hand this over to Mikey, yeah, love Trailing of the Sheep. I see that in the chat. I'm just looking at our chat here really quick. Oh my goodness. Hold on, stop share. There, okay, I'm out. Yeah, Trailing of the Sheep is absolutely great. So before I pass this on to Mikey, do we have any questions about this part of it? This was a really brief, like, Basque and Sheep 101 type of thing here, but I want to give Mikey plenty of time to talk as well. Trailing of the Sheep is in the Sun Valley Ketchum area of Idaho, so it's about 3 hours east of Boise. So they're saying that there's a sheep parade that happens in October in Cedar City, Utah, if you're in that area. Oh, that's great. Okay, good. So no other questions. All right, how you feeling, Mikey? Are you ready to take over?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. If you have questions, pop them in the chat. Now's a great time while we're kind of in between. I hope you enjoyed the brief history of the Basque and the sheep in Idaho and in the American West, though. Some of that I didn't know until I started looking it up, and I thought it was really kind of interesting. So
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, so just bear with me for a...
Oh my gosh, and this is a happy hour, so cheers, everybody. Chin chin.
I almost gave away the answer to the little prize, to the little matching game that we have. So I'm glad I caught myself on that. Don't want you guys cheating. Okay. Right, so let's get into this. Sheepherding Basque Historic Modern, as Kylie said. I am Mikie McDonnell. I just wanted to give you a little brief info of who's going to be talking at you for maybe the next 10-20 minutes. I grew up in San Luis Obispo, California, kind of always ag centered, growing up on 100 acres, horses, 4-H, some sheep and goats, but not a lot actually. Mostly, self-proclaimed cowgirl. And I moved to Idaho in 2009. I decided that I was going to go try out this state for a little bit, and I went to Boise State, and I ended up staying in Idaho for about 10 years. Through that time, I graduated from BSU with a biology degree with an emphasis in ecology. I went to the University of Idaho and got my master's in natural resources. And in between those times I was doing some range work, did some bird surveys out in Eastern Idaho. And then I ended up in between my undergraduate and graduate career, I got introduced to the sheep herding life. And that just kind of snowballed into a master's project. After that, I worked on a ranch in the Pacific, and then found a job actually in Haley, working for the Wood River Land Trust, and then was offered an amazing opportunity to leave the state that I do love so much. And but I'm very happy in what I do right now. I get to monitor all of our ranches within the California Rangeland Trust conservation easement. I get to talk with amazing people, and they share their stories. And I cannot believe I get to be paid for what I do. So I'm very blessed that I can still be out on those landscapes and work a little closer to home this time. So before we get into the whole shepherd life, I do want to get a little sciencey with you, but not too much, don't worry. I was going to talk about targeted grazing because that's actually what led me into the sheep herding business. So I'll throw the actual definition at you. It's the application of a specific kind of livestock at a determined duration and intensity to accomplish defined vegetation and landscape goals. And I'll kind of give you a little commentary on the pictures. I think that was my first year of sheep herding. That's one of the routes that we take up the mountain. And it's very contrastly with the isolation of the Basque shepherds. We do bump against a lot of people that are using the trails, and it's quite a sight for them to turn a corner and see 500 sheep staring at them when they're out for a nice little hike. But they love it, and that's what we do. So targeted grazing, there's a bunch of components. We like to say that there's an art and science within that. And some of the more science components are the animal husbandry, the selection of the breed, whether it's goats or sheep, and then you go into the specific breeds of those species, what's best for the landscape. You look at their health and their management as livestock. You pay attention to your plant biology. You're probably, as a targeted grazing shepherd, you're tasked with controlling a certain weed species sometimes, or you're tasked with controlling just fuels, just grazing it so that there's less of a wildfire threat. So hitting your right species and even your reproductive stages of those plants are really important things to pay attention to. You want to graze your plants when you're really going to hit them where it hurts, when they're putting all their energy into those flowers and they're not paying much attention to their root system. That's when you can really do some good damage on some of our noxious species or our unwanted weed species that we have in the trail systems. Here you can see that the sheep are grazing around the lupin and the yarrow. They're not paying too much attention to it, thankfully. And they've kind of learned those grazing responses over time. Your ecological responses, the effects of landscape, the intensity of how you want to graze, how many head do you want to put in a specific area? Is it more of free grazing, or are you really hitting that area hard? And then another is the duration. How long are you on that landscape? And that's really important when you start maybe utilizing that feed that you are targeting. And then your sheep get a little bit curious and start sampling some other things. And that's when you probably want to pull them off. And so paying attention to that duration is important as well. And then the whole aspect of targeted grazing is just kind of this paradigm shift. You're mostly, you're not really worried about pounds that you're getting on the hoof. These animals are tasked with specific, removal of weed species or fire fuels. So it's kind of just a little shift in your management. You're having a slight change of goals with that. So again, right grazer, right place, right time. And this is a great graphic that I kind of stole from my one of my great professors at U of I, which was Dr. Karen Launchbaugh. This really puts into perspective, you know, you're picking your right animal, and it goes down to their, you know, just their body composition and their physical biology. We usually, you know, attribute goats with eating everything. Well, that's because they are kind of the concentrate feeder. Their liver, compared to their overall body mass, is larger than the liver size of a roughage eater, which is more of your cattle species. You know, their liver can detoxify much more secondary compounds and terpenes, and so we usually employ them to, you know, graze those shrubby kind of species, and they do it well. And then in the middle is your sheep. You know, they are somewhat of a browser and they're somewhat of a grazer. So it's all about finding the right animal for the right kind of job, is how I like to look at this. So this is very important, only because there is a little game at the end. So here's something, you know, right grazer, right time, and I've kind of set it up so you can kind of look at the species, and some of these overlap, some of these don't. For example, obviously goats and sheep will utilize grass, but for, you know, targeted grazing purposes, winter grazing of cheatgrass is probably best used by cattle. They can eat that thistle down there. They can eat that kudzu at the bottom that you can see, just taking over. And then we start getting into the goats realm of things. This is buckthorn, so a tree shrubby species. You know, cows can't really, first of all, get their whole half of their body up a tree to get those branches, and also their livers, you know, aren't gonna detoxify that, as well with the juniper bushes. And then you go to the leafy spurge. Cattle actually become sick if they ingest leafy spurge. So there's a lot of opportunity there for the sheep and the goat people to come in first. And then we go to our beautiful yellow star thistle, which I will get to in a little bit, but that is a good goat domain right there. And then we kind of get over to the sheep of the spotted knapweed, and they also utilize the leafy spurge and the Dalmatian toadflax. So it's kind of this running, you know, gambit of where these animals can come in and be most effective. And again, sticking with that, you know, right grazer, right place, right time mantra. So this is the example that I wanted to just give them a little bit, only because it is in Idaho, and it's an excellent example. These two studies actually utilized cattle, sheep, and goats, and end of the day, they found that the grazing of the yellow star thistle, when it is headed out, like you see in that picture, it has those spines on it. When it was grazed, that is when the best, you know, the best detriment to the plant actually occurred. And it was also the physiology of the grazing area was in the canyon grasslands of Idaho. So like Whitebird area, if you're familiar, it is steep country, and I've seen cows up there, but it's just a little bit more accessible to our goat friends that are a little bit more nimble on their feet. Nothing against cows, I do love them, but you know, the goats just were a little bit more agile up there. And also, I think the biggest fact is that goats have these pili structures on their inside of their mouths that actually work as like almost a leather type of material. So they're able to, you know, ingest those spiny thorns. So they were the best species for that specific job. So this is a little introduction to where I got started. Like I said, I did not really grow up herding sheep. I fell into this grazing program via a NRCS agent who was based out of Missoula. I was doing a semester abroad in Montana, I guess if you would call it. I lived up in the in the Swan Valley for a few months, and I was connected with this NRCS agent, and he connected me with this rancher who decided that he was just going to give me a go. He didn't know if I could, all he knew is I could ride a horse, and that's the history was made after that. So just a little bit about this grazing program. Mount Jumbo in the North Hills, which you can see from the city of Missoula, heavily used trail accesses, very popular off-leash dog trail runs. They do shut it down for public access through November until that next April, because it is such an important elk winter range. A lot when the snow gets too heavy up on those mountains, these elk utilize kind of that wildland urban interface to get out of the snow and be able to migrate through there as well. So trail access is suspended through that time, which is another important thing as we are grazing those areas to just kind of restore that habitat. That program has been happening for over 10 years when I started, and it started with just a master's project from one of the Missoula Parks and Rec workers actually back in his college days, and it kind of snowballed from there. And these hills were just completely covered with leafy spurge. As you can see, these are some lovely before and after monitoring photos. And on the left here, we see all that yellow, and that neon green is the leafy spurge that's just choking out everything. And I guess a thing about noxious weeds, what you probably know, is that the biggest problem is it takes over and it becomes a monoculture where everything is going through the same life cycles at the same time. So if you imagine everything kind of blooming out and dying out at one time, you have a huge tinderbox of not only impalatable feed, but also a threat of wildfire that is just standing matter that could go up. So you see, after less than 10 years of grazing, you still see the leafy spurge, but you're also seeing these lovely bunch grasses coming back. That's another great thing about targeted grazing, is that you start depleting those seed banks of what those plants have been depositing for years and years and years. And you start kind of cutting that down. And it's something that clearly is not a one and done. It's not a silver bullet. It's a commitment. But it is definitely something that mimics, the natural processes of grazing without getting there with crews and spraying. And it's just another management tool that can be perfectly pinpointed, in certain areas. And here's another before and after. You can just see the dense yellow and that significant reduction after 10 years or less than 10 years of grazing. This point right here is with spotted knapweed. So you see all that purple, that hue that is through there, and you just see one little balsam arrowleaf right there. And this is actually where my sheep camp was for one of the places that I would graze at. And that little structure, if you can see right there, is where I would lock the sheep up every night. So then you see the post grazing, and we see a significant reduction in that purple. And then we also see our balsams coming back. So, we're kind of allowing those natives to come back and, flourish and begin building up the seed bank with their own species, and kind of just reverting back to before that infestation happened. And just a little, bear with me with the graph. It's a little hard to see, but I love this. This was a master's student that did the study before I started sheepherding. And I just want to point out, this is also another important thing of, duration and timing of your sheep, of your grazing. As you can see, this solid black line, bad leafy spurge, so that's the most important piece. The second one is potentilla, which is a sulfur cinquefoil. These both are invasive Eurasian native species. And they are being utilized right at the get-go more than most of our natives down here. So you have your blanket flower, you have your prairie aster, your lupin. Hopefully they don't utilize that lupin because that's not. And then, you know, they just did not like that yarrow, which is perfect. But it's just, you know, it's a great way to see that they did utilize these species first and foremost, and then, you know, probably started sampling. And that's just a really good look of like, you know, when do you pull your sheep, and just kind of gives you a good idea of how the more science-based, I guess, look at targeted grazing would be. So I'm going to get into my little shepherd life. This is a shot from my my wagon. This was from the first year of sheepherding. Montana and Idaho and, you know, California, we are always on fire, and it was clearly on fire that summer as well, and that was kind of a scary part because you know, I had a fire from the north of me and a fire to the south of me, and I was just making sure that, you know, I was always close to the horse, and if it was new smoke, we had about 15 minutes to get out. The rancher said, hopefully you're on your horse and you're with your sheep, and we have escape routes, we have all that other stuff, but he said, you know, if a fire comes in, I don't care about anything, you just get out. And thankfully nothing like that ever happened, but it's something that, you know, we need to be prepared for. A little bit of going back to, you know, the sheep movement that Kylie was talking about. From where we graze in the hills, the ranch is a few miles, I want to say at least 7, from Mount Jumbo, and we have to lead these sheep through people's you know, cul-de-sacs, and we have to cross 4-lane highways. We had to go over train tracks, under the overpasses, to get these guys to where they're going. So you know, the trailing of the sheep still happens even, you know, without a parade. I mean, that's a pretty good parade though, if I do say so myself. Just some more shots. I did have, that is the man on the bicycle in the back is actually the rancher, John Stahl, who's based in Missoula. So it was just me moving the sheep, but sometimes I would have some assistance when we would move from North Hills up to Mount Jumbo. The second year I did that, we had both of those grazing operations to do, and we would hit them for about a few weeks at a time. So probably only a total of 6 weeks that I was up there. It's another shot going around the curve. We're moving from the North Hills up to Jumbo. And sometimes we get help. Actually, it's probably a really great opportunity for people to show up. We would get a bunch of people on their bicycles and would help us move through some of the more heavier areas of neighborhoods and of those more town, you know, in the city of Missoula. So that was just such a sight to see. And here's my little campo.
Yeah. How many sheep is that you're working at one time?
So I counted one time and I didn't fall asleep, but I had about 400, 400 to 500. The second year we had lambs in tow, so I would say closer to 450 up there on the mountain. But yeah, we would anywhere from 400 to 500 usually, which is, you know, a quarter of a band, so not too crazy, but definitely all I would like to handle. I like that number. I was comfortable with that number. But this is my my sheep wagon. One of my sheep dogs, Misty. I just cannot say enough about these animals. They are incredible what they do, and they make my life so easy. I mean, the trust that they put into you and the trust you put into them is just unreal. It's a real, like, you know, you talk about the isolation of the Basque sheep herders, and I feel like, you know, you have a good dog and That's all I would need personally. But I was also only, up there for a month. But it's just some incredible things. And then here in my truck, which was actually at the base of the trailhead that we were grazing on, I had to wrangle a little lamb. He got separated from his mom on the ranch, and so he wasn't doing too good. So one night I had to lock up the sheep and hike down. I think it was a quarter of a mile, less than half a mile from my camp to the trailhead where my truck was parked. So I just sling him on my shoulders and take him down the trail and take him back to the ranch and get him reunited back with his mom. I named him Eeyore. So that was an interesting experience. And then I can't talk about sheep herding without introducing Billy. Billy probably was the original grazing coach of this whole thing. And it started with the fact that the sheep didn't really know what to do with the Leafy Spurge. After they grazed it for a little bit, they started getting this positive rumen response, we call it, where they're just like, oh, my tummy feels really good after I ate that. And the only reason that they did that was because they watched what the goats were doing. And the goats were eating everything. So they came along and like, oh, what are you eating? And so we actually put them up there my second year because we were grazing Leafy Spurge again, and there had been enough generations to cycle through in that sheep herd that hadn't been on that specific weed. And so we thought that we should throw him in there just in case. And the sheep did fine. Billy became one of the crew as far as the dogs goes. He figured out very quickly that I had snacks in my saddlebags and I was willing to share them. And this goat's actually broke to pack. And he would go into the Bob Marshall Wilderness, I think, in his early days. But with me, he was retired and stole all my apples, unfortunately. I used to actually have to have the herding dog sit in front of me while I ate my dinner because he would come right up and stick his nose in the bowl of whatever I was eating and take off with it. But
so, sorry to interrupt you, but
no.
I was really curious if anybody here would recognize that I used a picture of a goat and I used this picture of Billy instead of a sheep for our event photo. And I was wondering if anybody would catch on to that. So if you spotted it, you get a gold star. You have to tell me in the chat because
yeah, sorry. They're like, who is Billy? I'm like, sorry. Yes, Billy is my goat. Yeah.
Mikey, you just want to exit your little screen right there. It's like blocking out your, there you go.
So some days we would all behave very well. I'm saying we, the sheep and I did not have anybody else up there. I have to remember that. Some days I would ride in the morning on the horse and then sometimes I would give her break around 3 o'clock, just kind of set her out to graze. And then I would just hike with the sheep in the later afternoon. So that's one of the pictures. And more easy grazing, a little bit closer to the campo. And then, you have your days where not everything goes right. And sometimes your guard dogs get a little bit too rambunctious in the morning and decide that they just don't care. And those sheep clearly flocked together very nicely, but sometimes you get that. That's always not the worst that can happen. And I gotta point out, I had a great horse, Tennessee Walker, bomb-proof. The only thing, she had a bad habit of disappearing on me. Sometimes I'd find the halter attached to the chain stake in the ground and no horse. And every time she'd do that, it was usually when we were moving allotments. So she wanted to make the mornings interesting. And then of course, one of the herding dogs, Misty, who was just incredible. And that second year was everything that could have gone wrong did. The horse ran off, the dogs kept getting hurt. At the bottom of this picture with all the sheep, the I-90 actually runs through right there. we had some problems with fencing. Animal control would get called, and I would have to leave the whole flock to go get one. So it was a little bit biblical as far as leaving the rest of the herd just to get that one sheep. But that's kind of another thing to realize with these folks that are in the targeted grazing business. We're doing it in areas where, you see houses, you're going through people's houses. Some people do it in like HOAs, some people do it in trail systems like we did. And so there's a lot more factors that you kind of have to pay attention to, that the original Basque sheepherders didn't have to worry about. So, I'm not usually worried about wolves or cattle people. I'm worried about people's off-leash dogs and, the traffic and that kind of thing. So it's kind of it's a contrast, but it's a worry nonetheless, especially when you're working in any kind of agriculture. And I'll try and share some links, but I got to be a little bit famous when I was sheep herding. The Missoulian did a little article about me and got some glamour shots, and that was really cool. It was nice to be recognized for that, and also just kind of reminding the general public that grazing is a tool, and it's something that we can be using in multiple places that aren't used right now, and something that needs to be, I think, more educated to the public about that. So in between my sheep herding seasons, I did get to go back to the ranch and help lamb out some of the sheep that I then herded up on the mountain that following summer. There's another shot of the herding dog in the campo. This is how my bedroll was set up, and the rancher said, she's okay to go into the campo, just don't let her up on the bed. Well, that obviously was not heeded after 2 days of knowing her. She was right up there with me. And these quadruplets that I helped deliver on the first day that I was helping lambing out, it was pretty funny because, of course, the little white one had the most trouble getting out. He had the most trouble. All of these other ones completely fine. Solid white one was all sorts of turned around, and I'll spare you the details of helping a sheep birth her young, but it was an experience. So I had a little bit of lambing experience to go with it. And then while I was up at U of I going for my master's, I took a sheep science class, and one of the requirements was to help with lambing. And of course, doing a master's, you're staring at the computer screen constantly. So the next year after I finished with that class, I just kind of volunteered to take the shifts that none of the other students wanted, because I just, I always wanted to be around for those girls when they were going at, midnight. The sheep always seemed to pick the most miserable times to have babies. And so I just kind of stuck with it, and it's kind of something that I've always wanted to do. And today I still get to kind of do that. My boyfriend's family picked up about 50 head of already bred ewes this past October, and we are figuring it out as we go. I only had one bummer lamb, and I'm just realizing she's in all 3 shots, along with one of the bottle calves we had to take off the ranch. But thankfully, out of all those ewes, we only had one bummer lamb, and she's doing fine, and I get to be a part of the whole lambing process again. And it's just, I'm so thankful that I get to still do that and be a part of that, and definitely want to pursue a little bit more within the sheep community now that I'm here in California. Okay, so this is where we have our label game. So before I show you the slide, there's going to be 3 plants and 3 grazers or animals that are more in depth, or that I've pointed out are kind of the best choices for that. So the grazers will be labeled A, B, and C, and your plants will be numbered 1, 2, and 3. So your example answer for one of them would be like A2. So that, you know, you have to line up each letter with a number, and kind of put them in sequence of what you think is the best. And we can monitor the chat once I get there. Okay.
So to be clear, this is a game. This is serious business, everyone. A couple people have dropped off, so your odds are better.
Oh.
And this is for a prize, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, this is real.
One in the chat.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
Brian.
this is time to wake yourself up, take a sip of your drink, have a good look. I think you got to exit your thing, Mikie, because it's blocking out the middle of the thing there.
Yeah, I think I already saw a winner.
Are we doing the first one or the most right one, or if you get it right?
It's just all the three. So yeah.
Okay.
So the first person, Brian, was the first one in the chat right off the bat. So that was really fast.
Get it in. I see Crash trying to do this. Like, she's gonna win.
Yeah. There's somebody that knows a thing or two.
He knows all this already.
Yeah.
You know you
Okay, I will go to the answers. I think.
Does everyone have it?
I think so. I'm gonna just go to the answers.
Do it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't know what your problem is, but you're gonna have to click full screen or something.
So these were the accepted answers, and Brian fired off the correct. So Brian, we will get.
I just have to ask, Brian, are you the one that is a targeted grazer? You work in targeted grazing? I know somebody was, but I can't remember who the name was because it seems like cheating too. You can tell me.
That's okay. Hey,
it's okay.
The prize ain't that great. It's just a picture that I took of sheep, and it's on a nice little canvas, so we can get his information and send it along.
Brian, send me your address in a private message in the chat or on the email. You should have the email from the confirmation that we sent if you got that yesterday, and we'll send you your prize free of shipping.
Yeah. And I would just like to close this, and I would love to hear questions. I mean, I have a million stories to share, but I just want to, you know, be very transparent and say, you know, there are so many experts about targeted grazing out there. These are just a quick list that I put together, and I know that there's targeted grazers within California, and I have yet to really get to know them. But now that I'm back, I would love to start doing that. There are people that know so much more than me, but this is just what I can offer to you guys after living a day in the life of sheepherding. And so some of these people that you can Google and look up, Dr. Karen Launchbaugh from the University of Idaho, Dr. Claudia Ingram from University of Oregon. These people were very important for my master's degree. And I got to now be involved with Dan Macon of Flying Mule Sheep Company. He's here in Northern California. Great person to follow on Facebook. Lots of videos, just really good sheep content. And then a book that I really would like, you know, if you want to learn more, Dr. Fred Provenza is a pretty great resource about nutritional wisdom and kind of diving deeper into that rumen response that I kind of touched on as far as that. And he goes into all these examples that are just incredible. So, you know, if you want another book for your collection, I would recommend that. And so now I'm going to turn it to questions, and I will stop sharing my screen so that I can see some of your lovely faces again. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
didn't lose too many.
Feel free to unmute yourself, turn on your videos. This is the informal part of this. Tell us, I'm trying to. Okay, there we go. So I made it so now our videos can switch. I had it locked on Mikie. Yeah, give us your questions. If you have any, you can just chat with us. Ask us.
I think Tice, are you raising your hand?
I think Tice is having a problem seeing his screen, and I don't know how to help him. What's up,
Great.
Tice? Did you get it?
No,
Type it?
I only can see the person.
Can you go
I
up
only
to
can
the
see
right?
one person who.
I think that's normal. Go up to the, okay, see all the
person
people
who's
on the top,
talking.
go up to the top right corner and then do gallery view. Try that. I'm not very good at technical
Okay,
help.
that one.
There you go. All right. Now we're good. Okay, what else? Crash, this is your chance. Chance to grill. I have a question actually for those who came today. I think that we had a really good mix of people who have maybe more background in the Basque side of stuff, and then some other people who have more background in the agriculture or science kind of part of it. And we tried to kind of connect those two worlds in this presentation, but I'm curious if like the people with more knowledge of the Basque background have questions for the science people or vice versa. And I saw we have at least one person who works in targeted grazing. I'm not sure if they're still with us. And maybe hearing like what their experience is like. I would love to hear some stories of other people's connections as well to sheep. What about that? I'm gonna call on specific people if you don't answer.
We have a target grazing company.
Where are you guys located?
We're in Alberta.
Alberta. Wow.
So we do more city parks. We have the city of Calgary, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat. We're on blood tribes. We got animals all over Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Yeah, I think
So
you
we-
were on the CalPAC, or you were on the targeted grazing webinar last, February, I think, for SRM. It's great to see that we have people everywhere.
Yep.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi there. I'm actually in Southeast. Did you want to say something else about your targeted grazing in Alberta? Or I didn't know if you were done.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
Oh, you're done. Okay. Well, my interest in sheep goes back to the late 50s, 60s, and I was my great aunt and uncle homesteaded on the Colorado-Wyoming border near Baggs, Wyoming. Anybody's heard of Baggs, Wyoming? But so as a teenager, I did some sheep herding, and my great uncle had Basque sheep herders back in the day. But that started my interest in agriculture, and now I live in Southeast Iowa. Last night, there was a gathering. The Iowa State University Extension Office had a gathering with Ray Archuleta, who is featured in Kiss the Ground. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it was alarming how they demonstrated how we are killing the soil, turning it into dirt and dust, and then showing how by no-till and cover crops that we could so relatively inexpensively and relatively quickly turn that around and actually feed the soil and return carbon to the soil. And over some time, we could then mitigate climate change. So I'm wondering if this targeted grazing fits in with that regenerative agriculture, would you say?
I think taking, and Robert, please, jump in, but I think from my experience in it, when you look at just places that have been infested with these noxious weeds, it changes the water dynamics. It changes everything. Your watershed dynamics are completely thrown off. And I think getting back in there and doing something that mimics natural processes with grazing always has been. Grazing's been around before we've been around. I think this is how we control something without a lot of additives, we're not going in there and putting down herbicide. It might not be a huge solution as far as changing climate change, but I think the management aspect of it could be a lot less detrimental, and also can be a little bit more sometimes less destructive in certain places. Like you don't want to go spray herbicides in a riparian area, that kind of thing. So that's kind of my.
Thank you.
I feel it has everything to do with regenerative agriculture. Most of the jobs we get, the weeds are there because they haven't grazed. And the whole idea of regenerative agriculture is bringing grazing back into those systems. And so a lot of these city parks and areas haven't been touched in over 100 years. And so by coming in and taking care, we mostly do spurge. We get a lot of the jobs, but we're 90% spurge. And by target grazing and reworking these systems, we're trying to work deals with the cities now. We put a grazing management plan together to revitalize that. And it becomes a carbon credit. It comes to helping those systems to be better and help that wildlife, where we have grazing reserves in Canada that are so full of spurge that they have to reduce their cattle herds every year. And so now we're getting paid to come in and take that out because it is so bad. So we're now running a couple hundred goats and we can clean out 90 acres a week that we're taking spurge. But we take seed heads, we take tops, we come back twice a year, and we're just covering as much ground as we can cover and move on to new jobs. So I have 3 full-time guys for 7 months a year that live in trailers, and we run like crazy, and we're running thousands of animals, and it's just kind of that the Mikie had. It sure starts to reduce those systems, and the grasses come back great, which is what we're looking for regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, great.
So
You use the word spurge. What do you mean by spurge?
Leafy spurge is the species of plants that both Robert and I was targeted grazing.
Oh, okay.
It's that yellow neon awful. It's actually it's toxic to cattle, and like Robert said, usually you're paid to come in first. And they did a study that they put lambs on a native grass pasture and lambs on a spurge pasture. Lambs come out fatter on the spurge. It's got a higher calorie content. That milky sap. I mean, I'd have to push my sheep 2 miles to get water in one grazing area a day. If we hit a really good spurge patch, I'd only have to push them to water every other day. They wouldn't want to go. So sometimes, it's incredible what these plants are, but they are super invasive.
It's almost 22% protein. I mean, it's as good as eating alfalfa. So we fatten all our animals up on it, and sheep will eat it, but goats love it. It's like cocaine. They're addicted to it. They go. So we run more goats than sheep because that's our market. But when I get jobs that need sheep, then I rent sheep and run that. So we're just running goats now. But you kind of pick your animal, like we were saying, of what management of what we're doing, not designed to the animal. We just find that I have more jobs in goats that work better for us.
I have a question for Mikie and maybe some other people on the panel or that are with us today. But let's say you're somebody like me who's not. I mean, I have some knowledge and history of agriculture, but I'm not actively working in it right now. But I want to be able to support targeted grazing. I want to be able to see the sheep and the goat grazing industry grow. I want to see all these positive things happen. How can I, as a layperson, support that growth of that industry? What can I do to help make the dream work?
I think the biggest thing, and Robert's going to have a lot more, but I think what I've been seeing a lot is writing letters is when they make forest policy or whatever. I think and just kind of supporting grazing. And then what I do is it's the educational outreach about how beneficial grazing is. I've actually designed a targeted grazing game to bring into the schools when the schools open up. That's interactive. It's just kind of, getting that grazing isn't a dirty word into people's minds. But I know I would like to open it up to Robert too, because he's got the business, so he would know more.
There was a poll done in Lethbridge one time when we were there, and they asked, do we support the government's money, the city's money going toward it? And they said it was the biggest response they ever had for people coming in. And we had a 92% approval rating. And every time I give a presentation, I was told, yeah, it should be your first, your middle, and your last slide, because if politicians could get that good, and so when I'm talking to all these other areas, I'm like, let's make you look better. Let's help you put this together. It's all about you guys. I just want the work. But when we come in and run these programs and so then how many more people, all my herders, because you can't bring South American herders to Canada. I can't get them here. I am working, trying to find Basque and some of the French. There's schools over there that are herding schools and trying to find people. But every one of my employees were straight city people that I've taught how to run dogs, how to work things. And more people come all the time. I have 8 or 9 kids from the high school that get work credits for school to come over, and they're helping this kid and do things. And so we just are always helping agriculture and helping people be more involved, and letting the cities and people know that we support these systems, and we're picking up more work all the time. It's really quite fun.
Well, Robert, if you find yourself in the market needing a Basque sheep herder, don't hesitate to reach out to the museum, and maybe we can truly go full circle and once again get some connect you to some Basque agriculture sheep herders that are in the area, because they're out there. We've got big reach. So
there's a lot of people, and they can use them in the States. You just can't cross the border into Canada.
Sure.
So that's the hardest part.
We have some friends in Canada too, so we might still be able to help out, but
be great.
Never know. I think we did have a question in the chat too about how does altitude affect grazing, like the high alpine versus the valleys? Is there a big difference? It's a good question. Very technical question.
The sheep that I was running, they were just kind of used to the area. We weren't going up super high in altitude. It was still pretty much within their range. These sheep were used to it too. They've been hitting that piece of ground every year. So they knew where to go. So it didn't really affect them very much. It actually was better for them. Missoula had terrible floods that spring. I had awful hoof rot with the lambs, with the sheep. I was roping and putting scarlet oil every day on these sheep and popping them with a nice little antibiotic every now and then. And a little hard to do when you're one person, but you get it done. As far as the altitude affecting them, we weren't in much of a change, so I didn't see that.
Does the alpine grazing help or hurt the native alpine flower population?
When you have a sheep herd that is used to eating certain things, like we said, with the high protein of the leafy spurge, I have watched them literally nose past grass, nose past native plants to get to that one spotted knapweed bud. Once they know it's good, they'll seek it out. And then that's when you pay attention. You need to pay attention to your targeted plant, because when that starts getting low, then they'll start getting curious. They'll start eating off things that you probably don't want to. But you can't tell a sheep, you just eat this. It doesn't work that way. So that's just kind of how how that graph from that one master's student, there was still some utilization, but they were hitting that spurge and that other sulfur cinquefoil harder than anything else out there.
Some good questions. Well, all right, one last I'm gonna do one last call for any questions here. We're like still 15 minutes kind of over our target time of an hour, and I don't know about y'all, but I'm starving, so I know it's probably dinner time for quite a few of us here, so we won't keep you guys much longer. Really hope that you enjoyed this. I do a little bit of a shameless plug right at the end of this, just to say if you enjoy presentations and doing stuff like this every once in a while and staying informed with the Basque Museum, the best way to stay on top of it is to become a museum member. It's not terribly expensive, and it really helps support the museum and allows us to keep the lights on and keep doing programs like this. So I encourage you to do that. You can do it right on our website. There's, if you go to our homepage right on the right, I can show you, but I feel like y'all can figure it out. There's a place where you can even do it online, so you don't have to be local at all. Our very next event is Saturday. Sorry, you know, it's like this COVID year, time loses all meaning, basically. I'm sure you all understand that. This Saturday, we have our benefit dinner, which is usually this great gala in-person thing, but we have moved to virtual. But it'll be great. And we're doing an online concert, and we got musicians, some really quite big names, if I do say so, from the Basque country. And we have tickets available for that still online if you're interested in joining us on Saturday at 6. And then our next event after that is, if any of you have kids or grandkids, we are doing a youth art contest for the entire month of May, where you can submit art. All the information is online on our website, and there's even prizes, and I am giving cash prizes for this, so for the older kids. So if you have a kid that wants to earn $50 for their video games or whatever, this is a great opportunity for them to have to do some art and do something cultural. So anyways, we always have things going on. Become a member. That's a great way to stay in touch. Subscribe to our Facebook and other things that will keep you on top of it. And then I don't know if Mikie has any shameless plugs she wants to do with California Rangeland Trust. I know right now they're working on virtual tours of ranches, I believe, and all these different ranches in California. And I saw kind of a preview of one, and they're beautiful. So
yeah, we check those out because we get to feature Dan Macon of Flying Mule Sheep Company and his grazing of HOAs up in Auburn. And so we got, California Rangeland Trust was started by cattlemen, but we're getting the sheep in there this year. It's the year of the sheep as far as I'm concerned. So we're getting some diversification with our animals that, was kind of always there, but it's going to come to the forefront, for this year, I think. But yeah, thank you guys so much. And I really appreciate this. And thanks for letting me share my little story. And yeah, I got to live a pretty great 2 summers doing this, and I hope to facilitate it, and I hope to keep supporting it. And yeah, thank you all for showing up.
Yeah, Mikie says, Mikie says she's not Basque, but she also spent multiple summers sheepherding in a Basque sheep wagon, and she always comes to the Basque block when she visits. So I think she's more Basque than some of us are. So she's our honorary today. Yep, we have Basque friends in Argentina. Absolutely. The Basque Museum is in Grove Street, downtown Boise. If you're wondering, it is on the Basque block. That is correct. Wonderful. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and shut it off then if there's no other great questions. Thank you all for showing up. Feel free to email us any feedback, or if you have any questions. Brian, thank you for giving me your address so we can send you your prize and for participating. You're paying attention. And with no further ado, I will go ahead and shut this down. So good night, everybody. Agur. Agur.